Hello, welcome to the award-winning Gutter. It's about, 11 days left to this crazy transfer window, and still the Reds are unlikely to buy any mofos ever at all, ever. And that's all we have for you. Bye, see you next week. Oh, I'm joking. That was going to be Sean's gag, wasn't it? Sean Rogers, Jay's here, Beth's here. We did a Gutter, when did we do a Gutter last? It's Tuesday, it was Sunday. We did a manager special Gutter. So I don't want this to be a manager special Gutter, Jay, but I do want to start with the rumour that came into my inbox this morning, where it was on X or something. It said, according to @FootDistrangis, we all know his work.
Very reputable
@FootDistrangis. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, @FootDistrangis. Xabi Alonso and Liverpool are reportedly on the verge of an agreement. Xabi Alonso, that is. The Spanish manager is very close to returning to his former club, with only minor details left to finalise. Sounds true to me, Jay.
Oh yeah.
Shocking breaking news. What do you think?
To be honest, I don't think there's going to be any movement until the summer, really, unless it's a deal in principle and they say, well, the Slot sort of shake his hand and say, thanks for the league title win, you've done the best you can this season given everything that's happened, and you can leave with your head held high in the summer to a certain extent and sort of be on your way sort of thing. So maybe that's what they're looking at, maybe a summer move, but I can't imagine them doing anything sort of rash or sort of too quick in this window, particularly to get a new manager in.
The thing is, it's an indelicate subject to be talking about, isn't it, Beth? I mean, it feels, he's a title-winning Liverpool manager. We talked about this on Sunday, and no disrespect is implied by this, but we are in the business of, let me clear my throat, salaciously discuss.
How emotional you're getting.
So, I'm just choking up here. Salaciously speculating on stuff around LFC. And the child in me would be excited AF if Xabi was announced. And I would, ruthlessly have forgotten everything Arda had ever done for us. No, I'm semi-joking, but I do think there's a part of all of us, from those who are fiercely loyal to the manager to those who want him gone, quite frankly, who would feel galvanised by that level of change, because we know damn well he was nigh on top of Liverpool's list when Jurgen announced he was leaving.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jay. I don't think there will be any movement to the summer, and I think, the idea of having discussions with Xabi Alonso and things like that, it's a very delicate matter. And listen, the word from the club has been all through that they are behind Slot, that he retains the backing of the hierarchy, and he would be well within his rights if it did indeed emerge that the club have got any kind of agreement in place with Xabi Alonso to say, right, well, I'm going then, because it is disrespectful in terms of if he's a title winning manager, like you say, he's being charged with securing Champions League football this season. So I think anything in terms of those conversations with any potential successor, if indeed Liverpool did decide to go down that route, would have to be done tactfully and with that in mind. I said before we came on air, I don't necessarily believe that Alonso is a better coach than Slot in terms of the football. I also think that the football and the brand of football would be quite similar.
Right.
I think Alonso's philosophy is probably more aligned with Slot's than it is to Jurgen Klopp. So I think if people want sort of real heavy metal rock and roll football, I think it's going to be quite hard to find someone who's going to bring that. But I think what Alonso would bring, and use the word galvanise, I think that is probably the biggest sort of argument, I guess, for bringing in someone new in the summer, is that, it does feel like now there is a little bit of disillusionment within the fan base. We heard a few boos at the full-time whistle on Saturday, and it just sort of feels like everyone's just a little bit sad. And I think, you bring someone like Alonso in, it's a fresh voice, someone who's got enormous pedigree within the game, he's got a presence about him. Again, he's not sort of a Jurgen type character in terms of being super outgoing, but he does have that sort of gravitas and things as well. So, I can see the logic behind him. I think he will be Liverpool manager one day, whether that be in the summer, whether that be in a few summers' time, I don't know. But I think any sort of conversations that are going to be had around that, in terms of from the club side, will need to be tactful and respectful. And for the time being, they're obviously behind the current manager.
Liverpool's season, Sean, remains on a cusp, right? I mean, the ship has been steadied with 12 unbeaten games. This run of 12 unbeaten games, but it's been about as underwhelming a 12-game unbeaten run as you could kind of hope to go on in a certain sense. Yes, there have been some, or I talked about this the other day, there's been some highlights. Getting a draw at Arsenal was great, winning later Inter Milan was good. There's been a lot of disappointments within that unbeaten run, the most recent of which was Sundays. I would argue that the season remains on a cusp, and that even if Arne Slot has stabilised his position and the club are making pronouncements about keeping behind him, he's only 2 more bad results away from the murmurs of discontent becoming something of a crescendo again, as they were during that phase of losing game after game a couple of months back. Although it'd be disrespectful to be talking to other managers behind his back, it would also be negligent, as Beth has said, it would also be negligent if they weren't planning for an alternative scenario, let's call it that. Because if we do lose a couple of games, say we lose in Marseille, it's not impossible, say we get, the knock-on effect of that is we actually get beaten at Bournemouth. I think it's naive to think, or for any of us as fans, to think that the club won't be thinking, maybe we should make this bloody change now. Now, the thing that sort of mitigated against that thinking when people first started saying, I think maybe he's got to go back in, say, December, was there was a lack of available candidates. People go, don't be serious, we don't want the likes of Glasner. Iriola's not experienced enough. But Xabi Alonso wasn't available then. He is, as LFC speak, a unique market opportunity. And obviously it feels like an LFC grown-up thing to do, to maybe let's wait till the summer, give the manager the rest of the season. But time waits for no man or woman. And Xabi Alonso is available today. What do you think Liverpool are thinking just right now? What do you think Xabi Alonso's thinking just right now?
I think in terms of what Liverpool are thinking, particularly with Arne Slot, they wouldn't have gone through all the due diligence that they'd gone through, because the big interesting thing there, it was widely reported that Will Spearman had Arne at the top of his list for ticking all the boxes. But what we don't know is what was the list given to Will Spearman, because Alonso reportedly ruled himself out very, very early on, saying, well, I've already given my word to Madrid that if Ancelotti goes, I'm going to Madrid. So you can just rule me out. So when you look at what he did at Leverkusen, it's difficult to underplay just how phenomenal what he did was. They just ran out of a tiny bit of steam at the end of the year. Otherwise, it would have been something absolutely insane, like the like of which you'd never have seen again. The difficulty with the whole Alonso concept is that his release clause at Leverkusen wasn't just the clubs he played for, it included Manchester City. And having obviously, he's worked under Mourinho, he's worked under Guardiola, worked under Rafa Benitez, like his pupillage, if you like, in terms of becoming a head coach is absolutely phenomenal. But unlike in Serie A, you're not going to get many managers who manage Liverpool and a major rival of Liverpool's. And especially with us, myself included as a fan, by the way, just put myself in pure...
In England, you mean, yeah.
Sean fan mode. I wouldn't want that. Liverpool's big thing. If you want to go and manage another country's fine, but if you're a Liverpool manager, like, I hated Kenny being at Blackburn. It's only the fact I love Kenny so much, it's like that... You can welcome him back with open arms and that kind of thing, but it's Kenny at the end of the day, isn't it? But someone like Steven Gerrard managing Aston Villa, so what? But someone managing someone who's winning league titles, and I don't see how Alonso, say, goes to City. And then I can see a world where ruthless decision makers later in his life, say, come back to Liverpool, and maybe things would change. But I think if he's going to do it, he kind of has to do Liverpool before City. But that's
I think he has to pick his English club. If he wants to go to England, he's got to pick his English club and go, that's the club you're going to manage.
And that's the thing. The news in Germany, of course, was that there's more than one person in Germany reporting that he's already said, I've got an English club, I'm going to the Premier League. So just like with players, Liverpool have had dialogue with him last year. With Xabi, it would have been negligent, or 2 seasons ago, it would have been negligent if they hadn't, when Jurgen announced he was leaving. And Xabi will be having conversations himself. Like Neil said on the Gutter show the other day, Xabi's got staff that are out of work. Xabi's family love living here. That wouldn't be any different to being at Manchester City. So his family aren't going to have an issue coming back to England, I would have imagined. And what happens I think City hold the cards in a number of ways, because Guardiola's due to leave in a year's time, isn't he? But there's a lot of rumours that he's going to go this summer. So is it Maresca? Is it Vincent Kompany from Bayern Munich, perhaps? But then there's a vacancy at Bayern Munich. The news in Germany is that Alonso's already had chats with English clubs and that there's an opportunity for him here. Is it a Mark Gahey type situation where him and Liverpool have fluttered their eyelashes at each other, but Man City are the stalking horse in the background there? And how appealing to Liverpool look to him? And the other thing in the background as well, and it's interesting because I can make an argument either way. Richard Hughes has 12 months left on his deal this summer, as does Michael Edwards. So with any relationship, you're not going to know until you're in it. That's the bottom line. But I think if you're Xabi Alonso and you've got a pick of Bayern Munich, Man City, Liverpool going, we want you, there's going to be discussions there, I think, going, well, okay, what's your vision? How long's left on your deal? How are we going to work together? What's the CV like? The sporting director holds so much power, especially at Liverpool. I think it would be negligible for a head coach not to be asking questions about that. And I do think Liverpool need, personally, before you even talk about a head coach, I think Liverpool need to either extend Richard Hughes pretty quickly or have a new sporting director lined up for the summer. Now, they might just say, run your contract down and we'll worry about that the following summer, and maybe that's not a big deal. I find that quite interesting that I know Liverpool have a tendency to run a lot of contracts down across the board, but I would have thought sooner rather than later they'll be getting some certainty on Richard Hughes as well.
That's an interesting sidebar, actually, Richard Hughes. I mean, he came to Liverpool as something of an unknown quantity, but he was Michael Edwards' appointment, so everyone backed that, really, because the faith is in Michael Edwards. Richard Hughes gets his credibility via Michael Edwards. Obviously, we can see his CV at Bournemouth's good, but it's not being at an elite club. Let's divert onto Richard Hughes and just a look at his track record so far, Beth. In his first season, he's responsible for buying no one, but he is responsible for the appointment of Arne Slot, who wins Liverpool the league at first time of asking. It's a big tick for Richard Hughes. Throughout Liverpool's sort of winter of discontent, people started to ask questions. I think the failure to land Mark Gahey at the end of the window was a question mark against him, and I think the way January has progressed has increased questions against him. But one thing I think is becoming undeniable, his work in the summer, those that he did bring in, look increasingly like the choices they promised to be.
Yeah, I think like you say, the appointment of Arne Slot, it was something that I don't think any of us sat here would have, when Jurgen announced that he was leaving, would have said, that's the guy who's going to take over Liverpool. And so for him to do what he did, is a, like you say, a huge tick against Richard Hughes' name as well. And listen, I think there maybe has been a little bit of revisionism the past couple of months about Richard Hughes in terms of the summer business, because, again, in the summer, I think a lot of us were sat saying, well, it's incredible, this business that Liverpool have done. I don't think there was a single player that Liverpool signed that supporters weren't happy to have signed. So I think the biggest error was on the Gahey situation. But then Liverpool would argue that maybe, and I've come more to the viewpoint with Liverpool not moving for Gahey in January. I mean, obviously financially we know that maybe Liverpool were unwilling to match the package of City, but I also think that did they just see him as a bit of a market opportunity last summer? They liked him. They thought for 35 million it was a bargain, which it would have been.
Yeah. And the wages would have been half or 2/3 of that.
Yeah, and in the summer, if they got him for free, next summer it would have been the same. But in terms of did they really, really, really want him? And I think the answer to that is probably no, because I think if they really, really wanted him, they probably would have moved a little bit earlier. So the fact that they were willing to almost take that risk of not landing him on the final day makes me think. But I do still think it was an error not getting another centre back in the summer. I think obviously Leone's injury has been something that no one could have predicted, because I think he looked like a real talent. I think not signing anyone this month is an error. But again, how much of that is down to Richard Hughes saying we don't want to sign anyone, or how much is it down to, maybe there not being the finances there, or the right people not being available? So I think on the whole, Richard Hughes has done a good job. I think a lot of people would like a little bit more transparency in terms of, you know, the people who make these decisions. They don't speak about them. But that's not just a Richard Hughes or a Liverpool thing. That's across the board in English football. You know, we don't hear too often from sporting directors. The squad is incomplete. It absolutely is. But again, you know, realistically, how many more players could Liverpool have signed, could have afforded to sign last summer? So, yeah, he's not been perfect at all. There are definitely, you know, errors that I think have been made and questions that have been asked. But I think on the whole, like you say, the players that he's signed, I think all of them will be a success for Liverpool, to be honest. So yeah, I definitely think long term, you know, you do want a little bit more clarity about his future. Maybe it is linked partly to what happened with Arne Slot and beyond that. So yeah, there are definitely question marks there.
The quest for a centre-back, we'd hope actually, Jay, isn't totally over yet during the whatever it is, 11 days left of the window. If Liverpool think there aren't players out there, well, the evidence, certainly from activity from other clubs, suggests that maybe there are. I mean, Chelsea are supposedly deep in direct club-to-club talks with Rennes. Jeremy Jacquet, who's highly rated across Europe. They're supposed to have 3 other centre-back candidates. Now, I don't know exactly who they would be. I mean, Liverpool have been linked to, what's his name, Ordonez, the Ecuadorian. They've denied that. Liverpool will always say that the bar needs to be high to buy someone for the squad and the ambitions of the club. They're not just going to pick up any old centre-back or any old forward. But Liverpool's needs at centre-back are beyond just one spare man for the squad. Liverpool's needs at centre-back, we've said this on multiple shows, I think. There's a scenario by the summer, or certainly by next Christmas, where you go, Konaté's left on a free, Joe Gomez is left, finally left, or given up the ghost. Leone's not properly back from his ACL, and Virgil van Dijk's another year older. Where you go, geez, how many centre-backs do we need? You can make a case for 3 within a year. You really can. Yeah. To make a case for 3, it means the bar can't be that high, because your shortlist has to be quite a long list. This is what's slightly baffling about Liverpool's apparent approach, I'd argue.
Yeah, I think we look at the centre-back options going into next season. Who have we got? We've got Leone, we've got Van Dijk, and we've got Gomez. And that's all we've got going into next season.
And that's sort of best case in a sense.
That is best case, because in my mind, I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Gomez is to leave in the summer. You know, whether he wants to get more football elsewhere, whether he can handle it, whether he's happy being the 5th choice centre-half or 3rd choice full-back is obviously up to him. But it does scream like we do need to get sort of at least 2, maybe 3 centre-halves in, like you say, with the Leone incidents and him coming back sort of for pre-season, you'd imagine, and then maybe gets himself back up to fitness, but then the match fitness thing is completely different. It could take as long as that, but the one thing we've always done is always wait for the right player at the right time, and we don't want to end up in a situation, I think we said this last time, with like an Ozan Kabak coming in or like a Ben Davies coming in, where you're bringing someone in on loan and they're not going to be any benefit to the squad going forward. We need to buy players who are going to be here for not just a short term and fixing it short term, but also they're here for the long term as well, especially when you look at the likes of Van Dijk and his contract situation being up in 2027. So it's going to be a really difficult one to sort of pinpoint what profile do you get as a centre-half, because do you want to go and get an experienced 27, 28-year-olds and then spend the money on someone there? You want to bring in another 19-year-old who's going to be sort of playing under Van Dijk and learning his trade that way? It's just, there's a lot of different caveats to bringing in these sorts of players, and it depends what kind of profile we're looking at. It's just, I think as well, not bringing in players this window could be an indication as to what the future holds for Slot as well. I think they may be holding out on sort of not buying anyone this window because you think he's not going to be here in the summer. Why are we going to buy players that fit a Slot system or Slot's way of football, whatever that seems to be? If he's not going to be here next season, a new manager comes in, that player's become effectively redundant in his position then if he doesn't fit the kind of profile that we're going for in the summer in terms of a manager. So I think it just really depends on that sort of broader scope of not just the players, but what's the manager going to be doing next season, or what our situation is there.
That's a fair argument by Jay, and you hear that one you hear that one actually every time clubs are on a cusp, are they holding back funds for the new guy? But to my mind, Sean, the whole concept of the director of football was to sort of take clubs above that, in a sense, to say, well, hang on, we've got a philosophy, we buy for the philosophy of how we're going to play, we hire managers for that philosophy. And in this particular instance, anyway, the need is so urgent. I mean, quite frankly, we need a centre-back and a right-back. So ideally a right-sided centre-back who could do a shift at that side is somebody we need, and we need them now. If we want to, I mean, it's not even about salvaging anything from the season in terms of winning a pot or two. It's about making sure we get fourth in the Champions League. We're running at a really low points rate, even though we're hanging on to that place for dear life.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things generally before you go into the specifics. So, like, when you think about Liverpool, I think one of the problems they've maybe got to catch up on that Neil's mentioned is the schedule. Because I think Liverpool have always had an approach which makes a lot of sense, that if you've only got so much butter, what do? Do you spread it thinly across the whole slice, or do you concentrate your money? So if you're Liverpool and you've got so much turnover to then put on, Liverpool have an amazing bonus structure which is really appealing to players because they might come in on a low basic, but their earnings potential is, they're almost like shareholders in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Like if you succeed and do well, you'll earn the big money, but you're not coming in guaranteed that. So it keeps a carrot dangling and that hunger. The problem is that Liverpool have tried to concentrate a core 14, 15, 16 player group. And we've had head coaches, and all head coaches will say the same, they'd rather have a smaller squad because it's just so much easier to manage, and you can get players minutes, and you haven't got 6, 7 top internationals. If your fitness record is good, getting upset. And I agree, Bobby Firmino signing is the perfect situation where a manager can be under pressure at Liverpool and Liverpool don't care. If there's a player that they identify that Bobby Firmino is not what Brendan Rodgers wanted, isn't really a Brendan Rodgers player, but Liverpool take the view we don't really care about Brendan Rodgers in a good or bad way. That fits the profile of who we want. So I don't think Liverpool will be making any decisions whether they think Arne Slot's going to get a contract renewal, whether they're going to let Arne run out his contract. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that right now. I actually want Arne to turn it round and make it work.
Of course, I think everybody should want that.
But I think there's a lot of people that are just, they've had enough of him now, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I think with Liverpool, the other factor is that, being careful here, there are maybe certain clubs in the world that will pay agents a lot of money, maybe pay family members a lot of money, and do things that quite rightly Liverpool won't do. And that means maybe there are some players that will join other football clubs where, if the full truth and everything came out, would be maybe a bit more understandable about why Liverpool don't perhaps sign some players. So I have loads of sympathy for them not signing anyone in January. You've got the homegrown problem, which is their own making. They've got to accept that that's another problem that Liverpool have walked into. Second problem they've got is, I think people underestimate how difficult it is to sell players. So in Harvey Elliott, you've got someone who's been one of the best players in the under-21s tournament. He's got Premier League experience at a top club, assists, goals, creativity. Liverpool can't get rid of him. They can't even loan him to someone where he'll get minutes. Obviously, that's more financial because of what Villa are doing. Look at Endo, Chiesa. It's difficult. The players that everyone wants to buy off Liverpool are ones we don't want to sell. And the ones that we would like to sell, nobody wants them as a combination of transfer fee, wage package and everything else. So I do think that it would be difficult for Liverpool to just bring an option in for January, because no one will thank Liverpool in a year's time where they go, I never want to see player X play again for Liverpool because he's rubbish, and Liverpool, like, well, we can't sell him now. What I suspect has happened is that Liverpool are looking at the summer centre-back market and going, we can't bring any of them forward. And from a selfish perspective, you look at the options that are out there. I think the big one, Schlotterbeck at Borussia Dortmund, he ticks virtually every box.
Is there any reason he will be particularly gettable in the summer? Has he got a release or?
He's not signed an extension with Dortmund.
Right.
And with Dortmund being a selling club, Bayern Munich are fluttering their eyelashes at him. He's obviously going to be a key part of Germany in the World Cup. He would tick a lot of boxes for Liverpool. Virgil's played right-sided centre-back a lot. And when you look at the centre-back market, I do think there's an argument that Virgil going into last year's contract, you maybe have to move him to the right, because you've got players like Christian Lecaver at Leipzig. He can play left-back. He's an immense centre-back. He's a bit like Mark Gay in a way, that he's 6 foot and not amazing in the air. But every other box, he's very similar to Mark Gay. And I think that if I was Liverpool, but there's 2 left-sided centre-backs. Yeah. And I think you'll have a lot of people go, well, Virgil doesn't play that. You try telling Virgil...
Everton's left-sided.
Well, the Rob Gutmann option here. But try telling Virgil he can't play right-sided centre-back as well as he can play left-sided centre-back. Of course he can, and he does, and he has.
Yes. Okay. Let's move away from centre backs and vague hopes of signing anyone in this window. Let's talk about contract negotiations, Beth. Dominic Szoboszlai has been reported as saying this morning that contract negotiations are underway regarding a new contract with Liverpool. Of course, I'm happy here, but you know how football works, and that is something everybody has to take into account. There's always progress, but no decision has been made. There's a number of important members of Liverpool's squad who are out of contract within 2 years of this June, I believe. They number Curtis Jones, who is out of contract, if I'm right, in June 27, and in June 28, Gravenberch, Szoboszlai and McAllister are all out of contract. Liverpool have work to do in the midfield. And Liverpool have a bit of recent previous for letting things go the distance. We've seen it obviously with the 3 cases last season. We're seeing this season with Konate. Do Liverpool need to get themselves into a position where they're getting these lads tied down with 2 to go rather than letting it go to the last year? Or, quite frankly, saying, we can't get an agreement with them with two years to go, we'll sell?
Yeah, I think so. I think you would like to think lessons have been learnt from the trio last season, and obviously Konate hasn't been agreed yet. It doesn't look like there's anything imminent. But sometimes players just want to leave, or they fancy a new opportunity. And I think again with Konate, it's maybe more of a, the fact that it was allowed to get into the final year was maybe a knock-on effect of the 3 being out of contract, last summer. And so you would like to think with more of a set structure in place behind the scenes that those contract negotiations wouldn't be able to extend beyond a certain point. I think that all 3 of the sort of the main midfielders in Szoboszlai, Gravenberch and McAllister, there have been initial talks with all of them. I would imagine that for Szoboszlai and Gravenberch that there wouldn't be any issues there. McAllister, I think, is a little bit of a different one in terms of I wouldn't be surprised if the player wanted to move on at some point in the not too distant future. Not from anything that anyone's told me, just that I've said it on a show before. I just sort of think he doesn't quite seem happy. I don't think this season. I think his football has obviously not been consistently at the level that you would expect from him. I think he said a couple of things about maybe some of his South American teammates having gone elsewhere, and I think I could see a world where he ends up in Spain in another year or 2, and the weather and the language and everything like that, and he might just be a little bit happier. The pace of the football, the physicality of the football.
I worry. I know that I think Neil would agree that he's been selling McAllister to Real Madrid for the last year, I think, more or less. But I worry more about Szoboszlai and Gravenberch in particular, because I think they're very good, and because I think they would interest top teams elsewhere. And I think it's now becoming, I think the problem the likes of Liverpool have is once their players are attractive to other big clubs, becomes, their players are motivated to sort of hang in there. They don't want to do things in a hurry. They go, love it at Liverpool, but you never know, Real Madrid, Thomas Szoboszlai, Real Madrid might want me. Why should I rush to extend? If I'm having a good season, if I have an even better one, they could be bashing the door down. Why should I rush to extend? But that doesn't suit Liverpool's agenda. But I would argue Liverpool have to sort of reclaim the agenda and go, fine, if you don't sign, we are selling you at the end of this season. I hope nothing that draconian happens, but I wonder if Liverpool have to move to that point.
Yeah, and I think, listen, you look at other clubs. I think across the board, it is players now do have a little bit more power when it comes to contracts. But you look at Arsenal at the moment; they've done really well the past couple of years in tying the main players down for long contracts. Chelsea obviously are the masters of it, but maybe that's more for financial reasons. But yeah, so it is possible. I think you've got to obviously have players sold on a vision, on the club going in the right direction. And again, that comes back to that point about having that long-term sort of certainty. I think with Szoboszlai, I could see him being attractive to other clubs. I think, obviously you could see him potentially sort of, if Real Madrid came in, would his head be turned a little bit? The one thing I think with him is there really has been a noticeable shift this season in terms of how much he has spoken to the media. And to me, that is a little bit of a conscious effort by both him and the club, maybe, to make him a bit of a leader in the team.
Position himself as Virgil's heir apparent.
Yeah, and I think he could well be the next Liverpool captain, and I think that's maybe something in negotiations that would be potentially spoken about. So there are a lot of moving parts. I think Liverpool I'm not concerned really with the midfields in terms of the contracts. I think they'll get done. But you know, we've said that about other players, and then you know, said that about Konate last season, and it's lingered on. So you want to get them sort of nailed down as soon as possible.
And Curtis Jones has only got a year left, I think I'm right in saying, Jay, come June. That's an interesting one. I mean, Curtis had ambitions to being a Liverpool captain at some stage in his career as well. He's had a good season, and yet he always feels on the edge of being the odd man out at times when Liverpool have a full-strength squad. So do you think, coming to the last year of his contract, Liverpool might be in a bit more danger with him than they realise?
Yeah, potentially, if there's question marks for him over sort of his starting position, but then that will rely on whether they keep the likes of McAllister, Gravenberch, Szoboszlai long term, those sort of things. I think if you're Curtis Jones, you might want to maybe look at going elsewhere because you want to get that regular game time. But for me, and also the homegrown thing is also an issue, like we mentioned before. I think he's one you have to nail down. I think if you look as well, the broader squad, there's a lot of players, like you mentioned there, who are going to be out of contract in the next 2 years or so. A lot of them are the leadership group at the moment. Look at Robertson, Van Dijk, Alisson, you know, that's 3 of the leadership group currently. Mohamed Salah's in there as well, whether he's going to be here beyond the summer as well. So they've got to look at maybe phasing players into that leadership group. You mentioned Szoboszlai there, maybe being touted for that. Imagine Curtis Jones might get a shout in with him, being sort of, obviously being a local lad. He's been at the club, been sort of in and around the first team for what, sort of 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. So they need to start looking at who they're going to be putting into that bracket now as well. So it's very convoluted, isn't it, when you look at those sort of things, because there's so many different overlapping contracts and who they're going to be bringing in, who they're going to want to keep at the football club beyond the current contracts. I think Curtis Jones is one that I personally would keep, not just because of the whole homegrown thing and why he's a local lad. I think he's actually a very good footballer as well, funnily enough. I think he's on his day, he could start for Liverpool Football Club every single week. I'd have him in the team ahead of McAllister at the moment.
Yeah, I would too.
I think he goes really under the radar. I think maybe because there is that local lad factor to him as well. I think you sort of get the best out of Vert and Kerkez when you play Curtis Jones as well. But it is just it just feels a bit up in the air, the entire club at the moment, doesn't it? With the manager, with the performance on the pitch, and now when you look at these contract situations, it is a little bit sort of not concerning, but there's question marks over a lot of the club at the moment.
I think the big thing coming over it all is that, look, at a completely different level, I know people don't like me saying that, but like when I was managing and I had a real bad situation, I had meetings with the chairman and stuff and was like, look, we need to batten down the hatches and tighten this up. I'm going to treat this as if I'm the new manager, but this is the plan for us to get back to kind of where we were earlier on and where we were last season. And everyone was behind that, and that's kind of what happened. But I still had enthusiasm for that, but there was still enthusiasm within the group, within the staff and the players. Like, nothing had gone stale. We weren't at the point where we were hating each other, ultimately. Even just as backroom staff, we were not at the point where we were hating each other, but with the dressing room, we were pretty rock solid. It was good. The thing that we don't know at Liverpool right now is how stale is it? That's the big thing we don't know. So if Liverpool become a bit more dynamic and start performing at home and getting results, you would go, you could make a case of mitigation for Arne Slot on that basis. But I think one of the big things is just how stale is this behind the scenes. Does Arne Slot need to get out? You know, when
how happy are these group of players?
Well, I think start with Arne Slot. How much enthusiasm has he got? With everything Liverpool went through in the summer and with everything that's happened this season, they'll be up just on a human level of what happened in the summer, but then this season they'll be so gutted that they're not in the title race, especially when you look at the points totals of those ahead of them. And I think that energy, that enthusiasm's got to be there. And if there's one thing being manager of Liverpool Football Club does, it takes years off your life and ages you horrendously. Jurgen needed the holiday from Dortmund, and that comes into the Alonso chat. It might be Alonso needs a holiday and everyone sees the benefit in him having a break because of just how crippling the Premier League and particularly head coach of Liverpool is. If Arne Slot, if it is getting a bit stale, that's where Liverpool might go, well, we don't want to make a change of manager, but we've got to, because that might bring up the vibrancy of a Dominic Szoboszlai and a Ryan Gravenberch going, I was 50-50 before, but I wouldn't mind having a couple of years playing under Xabi Alonso. And it's that thing about Steven Gerrard, isn't it, that he's like, I wish I'd never left Liverpool, because if I'd have known Jurgen Klopp was coming, what would I have given to have another year there? You know, players like Thiago want to play under Mourinho and Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp and as many coaches as they can to absorb as much and have them experiences. And I think in the contract negotiations that would be a big part. Like if their relationship with Slot is starting to have a bit of friction, and the other problem is, do you have to start renegotiating these contracts of 3 years? Because if you're Real Madrid, I'd be saying to Dominic Szoboszlai, if you want to come here, run your contract down another 12 months, and whatever saving we make on your transfer fee, because you've only got 12 months left in the deal, we'll give to you. And if you want to run it down to a free, I'll give you the whole transfer fee, thank you very much. And I wonder whether 2 years is almost a bit tight. Whereas I think at 3 years, players aren't getting the same offers from elsewhere. So you've got a bit more leverage as a club. Now, the danger is you're renewing. Liverpool probably go, we haven't got as much data. How do their legs look? We might have renewed other players at 3 years that maybe at 18 months you wouldn't want to. And just on the Curtis Jones thing, you've got to keep him. I always want more from Curtis. I don't think he's improved defensively as much as I'd hoped he could. I always feel like there's more to come from him in the attacking sense of his game. But you need 2 players for every position. Yeah. And there's too much for Liverpool to do. If you need 6 central midfielders, I think you've got to keep Curtis Jones.
Well, if you don't tie these players down and you're at the point of having to sell them, you've got another summer of real overhaul on your case. I agree with you about the 3-year thing, because Real Madrid, the likes of Real Madrid, who are the shark in the pool, that they don't plan at 3 years' time. They can't realistically say, hey, we're going to ask Dominic to hang on for 3 years for us, because anything could happen. They could have some kid come through, somebody else could get in the way. You've got your best opportunity of renewing on 3 years. I suppose the implication for clubs is that if you come to the table, if they're only 2 years into a contract, say, here's your new contract, the players go, it's got to be a bump, otherwise we're not talking. And it becomes an expensive pleasure. Andy Robertson's gone vocal recently, Beth, about how he's on the cusp of a decision, obviously, in the summer. There's been some intimations from some quarters, I'm not sure where, I think Paul Joyce mentioned it, maybe others, that Kostas Tsimikas is due to return from a loan spell with Roma and maybe come back up to Kirkes. Do you see that as a long-term back? I mean, you obviously can't have, it's not easy to keep an elite backup by definition, but can you see that happening?
I could see it happening for a season. I think it's dependent on whether Kostas would be happy to come in and be the backup, which I sort of think he probably would. He obviously... Because
it's like being in Disneyland, apparently, at Liverpool.
Yeah, you know what? I really like Tsimikas. I think he's taken a lot of stick, and I think, is he good enough to be Liverpool's first choice left back? No, it's certainly not at this point in his career. But he does. I think 9 times out of 10 he does a solid enough job, and I think it is, like you say, it is very, very hard to have 2 elite players in every position. And I think, having someone who isn't going to kick up a fuss and isn't going to, cause friction in the changing room if they're not playing every week is not a bad thing. Next season, you would hope Kirkes is, even better. And I think, we can all agree he seems to be improving every week, which is a real positive. I think it'd be great to have Andy Robertson around for another season or 2, but I think he is the sort of player that he's not going to kick up a fuss, but I think he would like to be playing more than he is. And if the right offer came for him and his family in the summer, then maybe he would consider it. So,
have Liverpool even offered him an extension?
Yeah, they have had discussions. He's had talks with the club. But again, what those terms are, we don't know. And I think he was very much of the opinion. I think that's something that might be decided quite late on. With Robertson, maybe give it another month or 2 and then make a decision. I think for me, the thing about not signing anyone in January is, Liverpool signed how many players last summer? 6?
6 plus Mohamedashvili, I think.
Yeah. And so ideally after a summer when you sign that many players and there's so much churn, you would hope for a more of a quiet summer. But I don't think I think this summer's going to be another busy one for Liverpool. I think there's quite realistically a world where Liverpool have to sign 6 players this summer because...
You're doing that many.
But I think, if Konate goes, you need at least 2 centre-backs.
Yeah.
Because I think Gomez could well go. Or even if he doesn't, I still think you probably need 2 centre-backs because Leone's still very young, is still coming back from a major injury. Gomez has been unreliable. You maybe need a right-back, dependent on, where they view Frimpong long-term. You maybe need a left-back if they decide that Tsimikas isn't, going to be back up. I think you need a midfielder. And I think you need at least one forward anyway. I think to the current crop, you need another forward.
But if Mo Salah
If
goes...
Mo Salah goes, if Chiesa goes, which we expect, if maybe Ngamo goes out on loan, you then might need 2 forwards. So
Five is I think there's it's emerging that 5 is a minimum, high class 5.
Yeah.
Two up front, 2 at centre back, and 1 in midfield.
Yeah,
I think that's inescapable, isn't it?
I think that is what will be needed from the squad. Now, whether they do it is another matter. But I think it's going to be another busy summer, and I think when you consider that pre-season is obviously going to be disrupted by the World Cup, there's a number of Liverpool players who will probably go fairly far in that tournament. So to me, it doesn't really make sense if indeed there is someone that they feel that they can get in January to maybe expedite those plans a little bit. Might come at a little bit of an added expense. But then, like Sean said, it's whether they think anyone is able, if they can move any of those plans forward. If they think there's no way that they can, then they won't move. So, we might just have to like it or lump it.
Feels like they're giving themselves a lot to do.
Yeah.
The Paul Joyce piece was slightly worrying. There's a bit of uncertainty over the Champions League qualification, which we know would have a financial hit. The line about Harvey Elliott and Liverpool had banked on the money. Paul Joyce tends to either check information that he gets, or that information is coming from somewhere. Beth will know more about that than any of us around this table. So Liverpool having a £35 million hit to a transfer kitty, like the importance of the Champions League qualification and going further in the Champions League this season for revenue and Liverpool's commercial deals and everything else is going to be vital. But I agree, there's going to be justifiable concerns across the back line. Simicast they've been trying to get rid of for years, but maybe there was a question of a profiling the next player in more than worry about losing him. Conor Bradley has got to be a slight question mark because we still don't quite know. I think everyone feels he's got a massive ceiling, but whilst his latest injury was just real sheer bad luck, they've maybe got to look at, with his growing pains, might it take him another year or two of not playing 60 games a year? And if they feel like he just isn't going to be able to do 60 games a year, you've got to have some opportunity there. That's why I come back to my Lakeba shout, in that you buy a centre-back that if you've got a top centre-back with Virgil, you can utilise that player. Maybe at right-back or left-back. With Lakeba, it would be left-back. I think maybe Liverpool didn't move for Semenyo because, you've got Barcola and Michael Elise that could be on the move this summer. And then have Liverpool wasted the budget on someone that is a really good wide forward, but isn't at the levels of Elise and Barcola, and Liverpool would need to save that budget for those kind of opportunities if they come around. And then Adam Wharton, there's lots of news about him having a bit of a gentleman's agreement to move on in the summer. I've got no doubt that Man City adore him. There's quite a few people at Man City I think that like Adam Wharton. I think he'd be perfect for Liverpool. I think he would actually be a perfect replacement for McAllister. And I think if there was a world where you can sell McAllister to Madrid or somewhere and bring in Adam Wharton, and I think that would be a phenomenal piece of business.
Okay, we'll wrap on that note. If it's not going to be a busy January, it better be a busy summer. Still, let's not give up on a transfer window that has, 11 days yet to go. We've given up on transfer windows before and been proven stupid. Thank you, Shawnee. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Beth. And we'll see you all again Thursday.